Hi everyone. It's Sarah here. I'm doing pretty good so far. My spring break was really nice, very relaxing. I had a lot of fun with it. Just played. Honestly, I stayed home the entire time. I was really just playing video games with my friends. And I also had a sleepover then too, so that was really nice. Um, Today, very relaxing day too. Trying to plan a trip to California with my brother, so that's something. And other than that, everything's been going pretty good so far. So the musician that I chose today was Lou Harrison, and after doing some research on everyone, I found that his music seemed to be the most interesting to me. Seeing that his work was a mixture of Western and Asian styles is kind of what got me to want to learn more about him, and so I did. So that's who I'm focusing to choose on. He was born May 1917. He is most recognized in three areas: music for percussion ensembles, experiments with just intonation, and synthesis of Asian and Western styles. So it's a his work is described as mixes of Chinese, Korean, and Indonesian instruments with Western ones, and he was most notable for his melodicism. He had a strong musical background growing up. Before graduating high school, he was studying the piano and violin, sung as a treble soloist, composed key and chamber works, and that include like several quarter tone pieces. And in 1935, he entered San Francisco State College, where he would learn more instruments. Already only 3 semesters there, studied horn and clarinet, harpsichord, and the recorder and early music consort, and sang in several of the vocal ensembles. And he would compose a number of works for early instruments. It was in that spring when he would enroll in Henry Cowell's course, Music of the Peoples of the World, which he would hear the first recording of the Indonesian gamelan. And even in this fascination with the gamelan was reinforced 4 years later when he saw a Balinese group perform. And throughout with his works, he really did had a fascination with the instrument and would use it a lot. He would have private lessons with Cowell, forming a friendship with him through Cowell's recommendation. He requested works from Charles Ives and would receive a crate of photostat scores, including some of Ives' songs, which he would study and edit for the next 10 years. Um, During this time, he would also develop a fascination for American Indian and early California culture. Vocal lines in his ensembles would suggest indigenous melodic types, incorporated into 18th century Californian mission services. So that was interesting. In August of 1942, he would move to LA and teach at UCLA, teaching Latin notations as well as musical form and history for dancers. He also worked with another composer that I talked about. See, they're all interconnected, which is I think that's probably the craziest part. He would enroll in Arnold Schoenberg's weekly compositions seminar, and it taught him the importance of simplicity and method, which complements the license for freedom he learned from Ives. He would move to New York and become a one of the stringers for a man named Thompson's at the New York Herald Tribune. In 1946, though, he conducted the premiere of Ives' Third Symphony, which he would edit from the original manuscript, which would cause Ives to receive a Pulitzer Prize. However, like in spite of like all of his success, he adjusted poorly to New York, the stress of it, which would cause him both an ulcer and a nervous breakdown. but these experiences were used as a catalyst to change his composition style. 1951, he would accept a position at Black Mountain College and in North Carolina, and the third act of his chamber opera, Rapunzel, won the 20th Century Masterpiece Award in 1954 at the International Conference for Contemporary Music. He would eventually also develop this radical stylistic system called freestyle, which individual pitches are determined purely by the proportional relationship to preceding and following pitches without adhering to a fixed tonal center. So, freestyling. Um, Also, during this time, would start to develop closer ties with Asia, visited as a delegate from 1961 to 62 to the East-West Music Encounter in Tokyo. He would also spend several months in Korea and Taiwan studying instruments like the double reed Korean Pri and the Chinese psaltery shang. Um, he would eventually work with this guy named William Kolvik, who was an electrician and amateur musician in 1971. They constructed a set of metallophones, and they would be tuned into like a pure D major and with the scale. And these were just built from easy materials that you can make and find. These instruments were meant to be a superficial resemblance to the gamelan, and so they integrated these Indonesian sounds and these junk materials and this percussion ensemble and this just imitation. And with this, 1975, Harrison would begin to compose the traditional gamelan ensembles. Um, so he would write three or more than 3 dozen gamelan works, and these would be combined with ensembles with vocalist or Western solo instruments. These would exhibit features of gamelan music, including polyphonic stratification, characteristic figuration, patterns, and changes in irama. At the same time, he would increasingly return to composing Western instruments as well. Many of those works would explore cross cultural applications of compositional techniques, often using gamelan textures, embellishment styles, the metric structure in works for Western instruments. Um, and that was basically like what his music career would consist of. And so, yeah, he this is like that's what he would do, is that he would combine these kinds of styles. And honestly, they're really nice for one of the pieces that I'm going to talk about today. Very relaxing kind of styles, but just like other little bits like of the awards that he achieved, what he would do in his earliest years was he was very articulate in his political views for multiculturalism, ecological responsibility, pacifism, both in his writings and in musical compositions. He was also a published poet and a painter, was renowned for his calligraphic script, and designed several computer fonts. He would teach courses in composition and world music at multiple universities: San Jose State University, Stanford University, Cabrillo or Cabrillo? I'm assuming it's Cabrillo College, and the University of Southern California and Mills College. Um, he was also elected to the National Institute of Arts and Letters in 1973. He would receive numerous awards, including the Creative Grant from the Institute in 1948, 2 Guggenheim Awards in both 1952 and 1954, Rockefeller Grants funding 2 trips to Asia, which is most likely those where he went to Tokyo in 1961 to 1962, a Fulbright Scholarship, which would support a residency in New Zealand in 1983, and the Edward McDowell Medal in 2000. He would end up dying of a sudden heart failure in February 2nd of 2003 in Lafayette, Indiana, on his way to a major festival of his music at the State of Ohio University. So, even at the end, still strong in his musical style, still a music man. So I can only imagine how those people at Ohio State University must have felt. For one of the pieces that I'm going to talk about is Beverly's Troubadour piece, and so it's around a 1.5 minute piece. But what it does show is definitely those Asian styles. So you're immediately greeted with this Asian ethnic style that he works with, and it starts with the signature percussion and with bells chiming in the background. It's the 7 seconds in when I'm assuming that that's the gamelan that is being introduced. The pace, it's a pretty standard pace, medium speed kind of thing, and it ranges from its octaves to a somewhat high to a medium and high range. Definitely not a low sounding pitch or anything like that. And there's a lot of consonants on conjunction in this piece, and as well as a lot of repetition in the percussion melody. So it's gonna be the same throughout the entire piece. And it's the gamelan that makes it sound homophonic, but even the gamelan, it plays its notes really fast paced and quickly, but it also has its own repetition as well. It is a calm melody, and I believe that is really due to both the few instruments that are used as well as the little moving parts of the piece. Um, it's at the 1 minute 19-second mark. Gamelan ends, and it lets the percussion play until the end. So it's a short piece, but I think it's really nice and sweet, and it really gives you a glimpse of what he was capable of. And so I would definitely recommend listening to his other songs, especially if they have a lot more polyphonic inspirations from it. So he definitely could be a lot more crazier with his styles of music. And so I really enjoyed his piece and learning a lot about him. I think he's definitely a very interesting composer that's deeply rooted into music, and it shows an inspiration of non-Western European kind of music that could be incorporated into modern styles. So I think that was probably the most interesting part of learning about him, and I think that's really cool that he was able to do that and achieve like a lot of notoriety and fame, and as well that he was able to do a lot more than just music. So it sounded like a very filling life that he just did a lot, and so I really enjoyed learning about him, and I think he's really cool.